and has a grocery store that looks like it's straight out of The Walking Dead. There's nothing left on the shelves except for the vegan section. And even in a natural disaster, people would rather die than eat fake meat foods, fake meat substitutes.
What I'm going to share with you today is absolutely crazy, and I was shocked to hear about this. But wait till you hear about the story. They're trying to pass this bill that basically tags livestock for a reason that they say is just for the environment. It's to protect the animals from disease. But there's actually another motivation to this that you've got to hear the story. And today we have John Moody, who's a homesteader. He knows a lot about it. He's personally experienced this area for years. So I brought him on to kind of explain to us what is going on, because it involves you and I, and because it involves our food. So welcome, John. Thanks for being on here.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, John. Can you just give us a little brief overview of what's going on now with this bill they're trying to pass related to electronic identification of livestock?
Animal livestock tracking ID goes way, way back in history. Started with branding animals out on open ranges. How do you know whose cow is whose? That's where branding originally came from, being able to sort, keep track of cattle, know when they got sold at market, who gets paid for this cow. Very practical, nitty-gritty issue as a farmer. So branding was replaced as time went on by these ear tags that cattle now wear. So if you've ever seen a cattle in a field, see it got this big ear tag with a number and whatnot. That was like the updated version of branding, ear tagging cattle. And back in the 1990s, the government, USDA, FICIS, some of these agencies, along with the rise of the big beef industry, which is very different than the actual farmers, they wanted an even newer version of cattle tagging. They wanted electronic animal tagging that would allow them to know the exact number and location of all livestock animals all the time.
Wow. And what was the apparent reason that they said that this is going to be good for everyone?
Like so many government programs, it's sold under the idea of safety. So the government said, oh, we sometimes have disease outbreaks in animals, and we need to be able to know where these animals were, where they came from, to quickly respond to when we have a significant disease outbreak. You know, the irony there is, like, Ireland in 2022 rolled out electronic ID for under this guise. Well, we need this to track, diseases and other things in our animals. Now, this is a country that, as far as I'm aware, has never, ever, ever once had a significant animal. Like, have you ever been, perusing the newspaper or listening to the nightly news? And it's like Ireland, epicenter of animal disease outbreak that rocks. So, so on the one hand, Congresswoman Hageman and others have pointed out this idea we need a new system to deal with animal disease outbreaks has no evidence at all. We've never had an animal disease outbreak in America get out of hand. No other country that's implemented this program has even had, nationally, let alone globally, significant animal disease outbreaks.
I mean, even in Ireland, I think a year later, right, they announced the need to cull, which AKA that means kill, right?
Yeah.
41,000 livestock because to meet climate change targets, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the what's really going on here when you look at what the industry is saying about this, and then what non-governmental organizations, NGOs and what like are saying about this, is, I think your listeners are already well aware, there's been a huge push to get Americans in Western countries to eat less meat.
Yep.
Since we just had the hurricane, I always love, there's this really funny meme my friends always post after natural disasters, and it has a grocery store that looks like it's straight out of The Walking Dead. There's nothing left on the shelves except for the vegan section. And even in a natural disaster, people would rather die than eat fake
Wow.
meat foods, fake meat substitutes. The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the United Nations. Listeners can easily go look up their push to get people to eat less meat.
Yep.
They want them to eat less meat because they say it's bad for us, which is ridiculous. They want us to eat less meat because it's harmful to the environment, which to anybody who's ever been on a pastured cattle farm versus any other type of environmental use of land would know how absolutely insane such a claim is. But the real reason they want us to eat less meat is because they want us to eat bugs and they want us to eat plants. And nobody's doing it.
Yeah.
No amount of propaganda, no amount of subsidization has successfully gotten a large number of Westerners to adopt a plant bug-based diet. So now in certain countries, they're using EID, RFID.
And those are that stands for electronic ID identification.
Yeah. RFID was one of the earlier names for it, radio frequency identification. Now it's often being called EID, electronic identification of animals. And so in these countries, they'll roll it out under safety. And then lo and behold, within a few years, they're then using it for environmental reasons and trying to force farmers to radically reduce the number of livestock. Because what will happen if we radically reduce the number of livestock?
They have a solution waiting for us, but it's kind of like it's a little bit of a bait and switch. And I'm being sarcastic because it's a lot of bait and switch. They come in with this apparent, oh yeah, safety. We're going to protect, the farmer. But these farmers are being wiped out, right? What happened in Michigan?
Michigan, I think it was around 2000, somewhere between 2007 and 11. I believe they implemented, EID type tracking. And a number of groups looked at what happened to the Michigan farm economy and farm base compared to states that did not require electronic tracking and stuff. And Michigan was just a nightmare. They lost significantly more farms.
I think it was over 4,000 farms, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just a very, very large number of farms they lost. And, maybe this will help listeners. Why would changing an ear tag cause you to lose more farmers?
Yeah.
Because all of these things are more labor, more compliance, more cost that gets passed on to your farmer, which means at the end of the day, you eventually see this on your plate. If farmers are forced to call animals under the guise of environmental reasons or under the guise, eggs during coronavirus, eggs went up in price. Eggs still haven't came all the way back down. Well, why? Because there was forced calling of large numbers of chickens and whatnot.
It's funny how they use that word calling. I mean, it sounds benign. It's like, why don't you just say killing?
Yeah. One of the differences, though, often when animals are called, they're not allowed to go into the food supply. When chicken houses are liquidated, that's literally so you'll have these large CAFO chicken houses. If they get a disease in one of these houses, they quite literally liquidate the whole house. I think they use nitrogen gas or some other gas, and they gas the entire house, kill all of the chickens, and then bury them in a giant landfill hole, taking stuff out of the food supply to where people can no longer access it. This just happened to the Strong Sisters farm in Michigan a number of months ago. They had pigs at a butcher in Indiana, and they went to pick up the pigs that had been slaughtered and dressed and whatnot. And I think they're going to take them to another facility then to be cut up, turned into sausage and other things. And health inspectors forced them to call those pigs. They poured motor oil on the carcasses so that they could not go into the food supply.
Incredible. What's so ironic is they're going after the key food that actually is probably the most healing food that you could eat is grass-fed red meat. And I find it very interesting. I mean, that's how I turn my health around, and so many others are using red meat to heal their bodies. And of course, out of all the things, we have to get rid of that. This is what I want to know. Like the tagging, Does this also involve all livestock, even the big companies, or just the small farms, or just everyone?
So the current version that's going to go into effect November 5th, there's some debate of what version it is at the moment. I was actually just talking with somebody this morning before you and I talked, because originally the rule was only going to apply to steers traveling for interstate commerce. But last I heard, they've already expanded on this rule. But to some extent, it doesn't matter what the current version they're rolling out is, because back in the early 2000s, they told us what program they really want. It was called the National Animal Identification System, NACE, and it would require every farmer and homesteader in America to individually radio frequency ID tag every single livestock animal they have: cattle, pork, chickens, lamb, goats, you just name it. The program came with a 1-800 phone number. The perennial question, why did the chicken cross the road? The USDA did not want to know why the chicken crossed the road, but you had 24 hours to report when and where the chicken crossed the road to the government, or face, I believe it was a $500 fine per animal offense. Now, what made this program really interesting, though, is it exempted confinement animal feeding operations.
No way.
I mean, it logically makes sense. Why would you need to track an animal that is trapped in a concrete barn and is never going anywhere its entire life? Homesteaders, farmers, and whatnot, we would have to do this. We would have to make phone calls. We would have to keep very stringent records on all of our animals. Butchers would not be allowed to accept animals that do not have the upgraded animal ear tagging. But if you're a CAFO, well, your animals are never going anywhere anyway. So
just tell us what CAFO stands for.
Confined Animal Feeding Operation.
Got it.
So this is where the vast majority of animals in America, the vast majority of beef is still born right where I'm sitting on farms like mine. So the vast majority of beef in America starts somewhere like this, but then they're sold at auctions, which that'd be a whole nother story for your listeners, the broken beef auction system, where you go to the auction house and there's 200, 300 sellers. And guess how many buyers show up to buy cattle?
How many?
1 or 2. Because why would the 4 or 5 big beef companies bid against each other? Why would they give farmers more money when, hey, you go to that auction, Tim, and Jeff, you go to this other auction, and we'll never be bidding against each other?
Wow.
And so all this beef starts in places like here, but it goes through these auction houses, and then the beef get relocated to these feedlots, which you're very familiar with and your listeners have heard of, where they will have thousands and thousands of cattle basically sitting in mud pits, being fed nothing but corn and soy to quickly fatten them up until they run them through the processing facilities.
Yeah.
Pigs and chickens, though, are often raised their entire lives in enclosed barn structures. So animal housing units and other things, as they're called. In China, I want to say they were building something like 100,000 pig confinement farming operation. It's like the size of a small city, this building that's going to house, over 10,000 sows alone, and then all of the piglets.
Terrible. Yeah, I have 2 pigs and they get 5 acres. So that's a lot of space, a lot of exercise. What this bill, they tried to pass it a couple times, but with your persistence and help, you got it defeated, but then you're saying it's coming up one more time and to be voted on.
Well, no. So this is actually the way the USDA is doing this. And this is just one of the problems with how these agencies operate. They can write what they call rules without a bill or law ever having been passed. So the NACE is a program created by the USDA out of thin air by them just basically grabbing a sheet of paper and some Crayola crayons and going, you got to put these tags on your animals. And so that we have a bill in Congress and the Senate. It is Congresswoman Harriet Hageman's bill to stop the USDA from doing this. She's successfully stopped RFID, I think, on 2 or 3 different occasions now, either through bills or through lawsuits. In 2009, we stopped it through protests. And farmers like Wendell Berry and Joel Salatin and others saying, we're just not going to tag our animals. You'll have to take us to jail before we start throwing these tags on.
Wow. Okay, so is this a national program or does it go state by state?
This is national. So this is a national program from the USDA. And again, they've tried to get people to accept it this time by rolling back everything that's involved, which is why I've been out there, sounding the fire alarm, because their goal is to get people not to care as much because it's only interstate steers, or maybe it's only interstate steers now and dairy cattle. But they've told us repeatedly for 2 decades what they want is a universal livestock tracing system that gives them complete and total knowledge of location and numbers of every livestock animal in the nation.
So what can an average person do about this? Because sometimes it's kind of hopeless and overwhelming.
Well, the good news is it was average people who stopped this program in 2009. The protests I went to for the USDA listening hearings, for every one farmer that was there was 10 people eating. And that's why people like you are so important, because the majority of your audience are eaters. And they're just always like, well, I'm not a farmer. And that's why we need you to speak up for your farmers. Because America, I think, is now down to maybe only 2 or 3 million farming households in the nation. Contrast that with just 100 years ago, 50% of American households were farming households.
Wow. Incredible.
And now it's just 2 or 3 million total farming households are left. There's not enough farmers left to successfully push back anymore against basically the calling of the farmers themselves at this point. So, your listeners, average people, it really starts with you buying your food directly from local farmers. That is one of the biggest things you can do, is reallocate where you're spending your money, so your cows are no longer going through these feedlots and through all of these just atrocious systems and places. For helping stop RFID proper, you can call your congressperson or your senator. Really, it's best to call both and ask them to support Hageman's amendment that would stop the USDA from being able to require RFID tagging on animals of any kind.
And so what we'll do is we'll just, in the description, we'll put this information specifically so they can remember it. But I think everyone needs to step up at the table and do something about it, because if we have a number of people do this, then they're not going to pass it, or actually it's going to be defeated.
Yeah. And other things you can do. Some farmers still don't even realize this is happening in November. The USDA they learned from their mistakes previously, where they'd announce this very broadly it was happening, so they would get a lot of pushback. This time they've been very, very quiet about the implementation of the program, because they're like, well, it's just for one small type of animal. So this has really flown under the radar over the past year. So letting your farmer know that this is going to happen, letting butchers know this is going to happen, and getting them on board with not complying. I've been able to get some butchering associations, homesteaders, farmers, non-compliance, and your farmer knowing that you will support them if they don't comply is really, really crucial. Years ago, when my buying club was raided, one of the reasons I was willing to stand up to my state health department to protect people's access to food in Kentucky is I had people who said to me, if you will fight for this, Even if it means you're going to jail, we'll make sure your wife and kids are taken care of while this happens. Your farmers need that kind of committed support to be willing to risk running afoul, of the USDA.
So there's also a seminar. I think there's two seminars. There's one in November, and then there's one next year. Tell us about this seminar, what that's all about.
Yeah. So years ago, Joel Salatin, you had him on your show a couple months ago. I think people loved it. Joel approached me about starting a conference to organize pushback against all of this regulation that makes accessing real food so hard and so expensive. And we named it the Rogue Food Conference. And our next one is in November. November, I think it's 8th and 9th in Dallas, Fort Worth. It's actually on the Fort Worth side, kind of northwest side of the Dallas, Fort Worth area at Met Church, beautiful location. And the theme is going to be come and tag it. And so the theme is people coming together to work together, not just to stop RFID, but to really remind the government that we get to decide what we eat and who it comes from. Years ago, there was a lawsuit that was filed against the federal government over the interstate ban on the sale of raw milk. So there's supposedly an interstate ban on transporting raw milk across state lines for sale. No law was ever passed for this, by the way. This is once again some government agency, some government bureaucrat grabbing colored pencils and making law out of thin air. Some people sued over this interstate ban on the sale of raw milk. The government's response to this lawsuit is startling if you've never seen it. I'll send it to you afterwards because you might want to just read it to your listeners sometimes. But in this response, they say things like, there is no fundamental right to choose what you eat or what you feed your family. There is no fundamental right to food. They basically, they went point by point basically to saying, we're the final arbiter of what food is, and we're the final decider of who you can get food from.
Wow, that's totally 100,000% insane. That is crazy. I'll have to put the link down below so people can read that. And also we'll put the link for this seminar in November.
Yep.
Is it October or November?
November 8th and 9th, Dallas, Fort Worth. So Rogue Food Conference, come and tag it. And then we're going to be down in Florida in March, doing a Rogue Health and Wellness in Florida for people who need some vitamin D come deep winter. Yeah.
So, and then just as a side note, I just think this is fascinating. Tell listeners what happened to you. You got raided, and how you overcame that raid.
Yeah. So it was Memorial Day weekend, 2011. This was at the height of the government shutting down raw milk farmers, local food buying clubs, basically anybody who was a little too successful at local food. The government went on a decades-long rampage trying to shut them down, put them in jail, fine them out of existence. So you can go on YouTube, see the video footage of Rossum Food Co-op in California. So this is like total hippie California people. And all of these police and SWAT people are running through Rossum Co-op with guns drawn as if the hippies and the kale are going to shoot back.
Right.
Just totally absurd things. So we were raided and served cease and desist and quarantine orders Memorial Day weekend 2011. Up until that point, pretty much everybody who'd been raided or faced the government had been shut down or lost. And we were just really, really fortunate that all of my buying club members, almost like 90% of the members, were all willing to go to jail with me.
Wow.
And so my strategy for beating the Kentucky Health Department was pretty simple. I look really bad in prison stripes. And so if I'm going to jail, I'm going to jail with friends. And so I took 2 sheets of paper. On one sheet of paper, I typed up the pertinent sections of the Kentucky State Constitution. And then on the second sheet of paper, I put a simple line at the top, and it said, I, the undersigned, in accord with my God-given and Kentucky constitutional rights, am taking my milk from my cows. And if anyone at the Kentucky State Department of Health would like to talk with me about this, they can reach me at the name and phone number below. I put these 2 sheets of paper right next to the cease and desist and quarantine orders, because I wanted people to see, like the cease and desist and quarantine orders are real credible threats. It was something like a minimum of 30 to 90 days in jail for breaking a cease and desist and quarantine order, a minimum of $5,000 to $10,000 in fines. So I didn't want to dupe people into doing this. I wanted them to fully know, like, if you sign this with me, this is what they're threatening us over milk. So I put the cease and desist and quarantine orders. I put these sheets of paper, and we had like 90% of our members choose to break the quarantine and take their milk anyway.
Wow, what happened?
So then I went on a media campaign to make the Kentucky Health Department look really, really bad. Because like I live in Kentucky. I always joke, in Kentucky, like roughly 80% of all smokers of America who are left smoking still live in Kentucky, and 100% of them seem to live in my county. We have a gas station just up the road from my farm, and it almost seems like a lot of my neighbors exclusively eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner out of that gas station diner. You look at the data on health, especially in Kentucky and these southern central states, it's terrifying. So I would go on radio shows and other places, and I'd just be like, I don't understand why the health department is spending all of this energy on people who are desperately trying to be healthy, desperately trying to raise healthy families, while Kentucky literally has a smoking, opioid, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer epidemic. And so I just asked this question to get people thinking about, like, why does the government spend an inordinate amount of time and money trying to make it so hard for people to access healthy food?
Right. It's like, it's almost as if they want to make us sick. And again, I'm being very sarcastic. What was the final thing of that story? What happened?
Yeah. So it took about a week, but on Wednesday night or Thursday morning, I started to get emails from some of my buying club members where they were forwarding something from the health department. And the health department never said they did something wrong. They never apologized. But the email basically said that there had been a misunderstanding. Because sending people to a private buying club where people are merely picking up food from local farmers and threatening them all with fines and jail is just a misunderstanding. But they completely walked away. And the best news for us has been, ever since that, that's 13 years ago now, unless a farmer in Kentucky does something really silly, like tries to sell raw milk on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, the Kentucky Health Department has left raw milk alone in our state. Raw milk has been allowed to thrive because a bunch of good people up in Louisville, just like moms with babies and dads who are plumbers and doctors and professors and accountants, they were willing just to sign a single sheet of paper and see if the government would come and take it.
I think the moral of the story is just that we all can do something about it, and you have to not leave it for the other guy. You have to personally stand up and fight for your food, and they don't want to be embarrassed, so they back down. So that's amazing. That's an amazing story. So thank goodness we got people like you that are like setting the trend or at least figuring it out so other people can do similar things.
Yeah. Well, and again, like I'm only not in jail because my members agreed with me that I'm the sole arbiter of who gets to decide what my family eats and where it comes from.
Exactly.
And that's why Joel and I are doing Rogue Food in Dallas this year, moving it to Texas. Listeners that are down in that region, come join us. Because I'm just one person. I'm easy for the government to jail, get rid of, silence. A friend was pointing out this morning that he was searching for Rogue Food Conference on podcasts and stuff and other places. And he's like, you're clearly being censored, because he put it in. He's like, I don't see it anywhere. He's like, you and Joel have done 20 podcasts in 3 weeks, and it doesn't show up in any search results, because the thing corporations and governments fear most are people who actually take action, and people who realize I really can make a difference. I'm not as helpless as they're trying to make me feel and think I am.
Right. Right. And so I'm going to put these links down below. So I think we really appreciate if everyone contacts their representative and tells them that you object to this and this crazy, stupid bill. And I guess we'll just put the details as well, so everyone can not have to memorize that. Amazing. John, I really appreciate you coming on. This is going to be, I think, a really big deal to stop this, because it's at the heart of healing someone is the grass-fed meats. So thank you for being on. And we'll have to do an update really soon to see what happens after this November thing.
And again, thank you so much for your work. Since getting to know you now over the course of the last few months, we've had like friends from all over through our house, and they're like, I love Dr. Berg. I love his videos. I love what he's doing. And so men like you are making such a difference for small farmers and homesteaders, because you're using your influence not to enrich yourself, but to enrich everybody. I just want to thank you for that.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.